Hello and welcome to Starts and Grafts. A happy new year to everyone listening. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Connor, and each week I'm joined on the podcast by emerging creative talent to discuss their journeys so far, how their work's been impacted by the pandemic, and what the future holds. This week's guest is an anti-disciplinary practitioner making work through direction and sound design. She's worked at some of the UK's leading venues, including the Young Vic, and has taken up creative residencies overseas in places such as Italy, Serbia and China. To top it all off, she is now sharing her knowledge and experience as an associate lecturer on the Performance Design and Practice course at the University of Arts, London. Munotida Chinyanga, welcome to Starts and Grafts.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. It's great to actually meet you. It's great to be meeting new people through the podcast. How are you?
I'm a bit tired, but also Christmas is coming, so I'm really excited because it's the only kind of not good thing this year, but like it's something good to look towards. So yeah, I'm good. Just wrapped a few projects, but yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not bad. So I'm recording from London. Are you recording from London as well?
I'm recording from East London near Walthamstow.
So like you just said, whilst we've got Christmas to look forward to, there's all this talk of, is London going to end up in tier 3 over the next few weeks? How are you feeling about that?
See, I feel like I'm like the worst person to ask these questions because I'm like super antisocial. Even with like family stuff, I'm like, okay, great. This means that we won't have those annoying uncles over this year.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in the middle. I mean, because also I've just been finished working at a few drama schools, so it's actually meant that I've had to be working within the actual place, instead of working from home.
Sure.
So it hasn't really changed that much for me.
Okay.
And also, I'm just getting really confused on what is the difference between the tiers. Where am I supposed to be? Where should I go? But I'm just ready to stay in the house this Christmas. So whatever tier it is, I'm here in the house.
That's fair enough. I think I'm going to go back up north for Christmas, and I think there's talk of Manchester and the surrounding areas going to tier 2. So I'm actually kind of jumping ship at the right time, I think, from London and going back to fingers crossed, a better area. But I'm really looking forward to chatting to you because I had a look, and just from the introduction that I gave at the start, it's clear that there's going to be so much to talk about because the list of different things that you've achieved in such a short space is fascinating.
It's hard to define exactly it is what I do. I mean, I'm only kind of learning how to organize and structure it in my mind. So yeah, it's going to be kind of a mess and I may go on a tangent or I may end up somewhere else. But yeah, I'm a lot of things. And in my mind, it's a lot of
I think sometimes those tangents are the best places to go to, the unexpected ones. So I think a really good starting point, especially for me and for the listeners, is to find out more about what you do and what is a anti-disciplinary practitioner.
Questions. Do I even know these answers? Okay, so I think the cleanest and most focused way to say what I do is that I am a director and a sound designer. I think that's kind of the easiest things I give whenever someone asks what I do.
Sure.
I've actually had a problem in answering this question, so I had to sit down a long time ago and go, what exactly is this and how do I answer this? And I ended up with these kind of 3 separate branches. I always forget the last branch, so hopefully when I get there, I remember it. So the first branch is the sound-led, design-led work. I think when I graduated from my BA, I graduated from Middlesex University and they do this course on contemporary performance practice, which is like really collaborative. And then when I graduated, I realized that the work that's happening in commercial spaces and venues isn't what I imagined it would be, and the structures aren't as I imagined it would be. You know, there's a lot of hierarchy and a lot of this idea of, I'm not against text. I think, you know, for a long time I used to be like, oh, I hate text.
As in a play text itself.
Yeah, there was this idea of serving the text, and I was always that person that's like, oh, but why do we need to serve the text? Are we waiters? Can we not just work with the text to figure out something else? But when I graduated, there was this like sense of the text is up here, and then we have the director's vision, and then you have kind of the designer, the set designer's costume as the kind of director's best friend, and then under that is like the rest of the gang. And I was like, cool, 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 cool. What does this mean for me as a sound designer? And then I realized that maybe I'm not a conventional sound designer. Even in my direction, I really enjoy doing design-led work, which basically means thinking of a design concept or a way in which I want information or a story or narrative to be communicated, and then finding the right text that fits that. So for sound design and sound work, I'm not just interested. I mean, I love sound, musicality. I listen to all types of music. I can talk about that forever. But I'm also interested in the way in which we receive information,
Sure,
I think.
okay.
So whether that's through headsets or vibrations or just different sonic equipment and how that gets to us. So I became obsessed with silent disco headsets and this idea of having this individual experience, but also communal.
It's like a community of individuals, isn't it?
Exactly, through sound. And it's like, oh my gosh, wow. Well, it was everything I really wanted to do. And I was like, okay, so how can I make work using this equipment? How do we bring theater into that? So I think that's kind of the design led stuff. So most of my work in design comes from concepts and equipments and technology that I want to play with and experiment. And most of the time, the stuff I do is quite international. So looking at ways in which we can learn from one another across, different borders, looking at cross culture and what it means to not have English as the primary language and
Yeah.
how, theater with no words and blah, blah, blah. So sound was really important in that sense. And I learned a lot from that. So that's like my first strand.
And at what stage did sound really start to interest you? Was that when you were studying? At what point did you think, this is for me, this is my interest?
I didn't understand its power during my BA. But then when I did my MA
Mm,
and I started kind of reading the research papers and I read something about like earphone art and the way in which we receive sound. I remember reading, or I think someone told me about like this book on the way in which interior design and how they look at sound design in restaurants and spaces, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is way more than just listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers on a Sunday. So I was like, there's so much that we can do and so much different way to access stories through sound and a different experience. And that's when I was like, okay. So it was during my master's,
sure.
we kind of were allowed to pick different focuses, and one of them were like sound. So that was like, boom.
Mm,
The second strand is international collaboration, which I've kind of spoke about already. So yeah, I set up this, not just me, myself and my frequent collaborator slash friend, set up this collective called State of the Art. And someone was asking me again, what is State of the Art the other day? And I was like, it's not really a theatre company, but kind of collective of artists. And what we like to do as artistic directors is train emerging talent in understanding contemporary practices. For example, we run this thing at Middlesex University where a bunch of students prepare a short show and then they take it over to the National Theatre of Rome and learn what it means to kind of tour shows and also learn how to navigate that environment. And then over there, it's not just a show they're presenting, they also sit within roundtable talks, so kind of allowing them to see how kind of academic side fits in. So it's not just, because sometimes I guess at uni you're reading a lot of books and you may not really understand why this is important, but then being able to put that into practice is really useful. And I think it was really useful. I think it is useful for them.
No, that sounds like really important artist development. I think just
Yeah.
the two strands that you've touched upon within your work are so fascinating because for me, I did an English and theatre degree,
Mm.
and elements of sound were only something that was kind of tapped into very briefly.
Yeah,
Everything was just touched upon, and we never went into depth
exactly.
into the things that sat outside of the text, which I think is why I'm so fascinated about having this chat.
For me, it was so hard to define my practice and who I was because it wasn't sitting within the conventions. It wasn't something I was reading. And so offering these opportunities and allowing students to figure out ways of talking about their practice and finding this language. Maybe this language doesn't exist within the UK, but it exists in European venues and organizations. So them to be able to see that and go, oh, okay, that's something I like and something I can do and something I want to experiment and try. So I think that awareness and giving them those opportunities is really important. So that's why we kind of do that. And that's the international collaboration side.
Sure.
And then finally, I remembered.
You sound out of breath already.
Is the directing. So, and it's a lot of different things in directing, but I think I'm going to pick the most important one. And that is based off one of my favorite things, wrestling.
Are you a wrestling fan?
I mean, I haven't watched wrestling in a while, maybe because of work, but obsessed, obsessed. I know my wrestling.
Amazing. Are you kind of WWF Attitude Era or kind of the family generation WWE?
I feel like Attitude Era had the best storylines, but also I feel like the innovation, the development they're doing, is not as fast and it's not as good, but it's still here, which I think is really important. And they're trying in the PG era.
Yes.
So for me, wrestling, from a very young age was very important to me. And I think, again, because of the design element, my practice as research dissertation piece was to prove that wrestling is, as well, in my opinion, the highest form of theatre.
Yeah.
So I did that. And what I realized, because it's live, it's responsive, they really respect the audience. And the audience know their power. And that's what I wanted to see in my audiences and my shows. Like, how do we do that?
It's the most unconventional audience that you can find
Exactly.
in what is essentially a theatrical space. I couldn't agree more.
Exactly. And they're so responsive and they're with you. And again, the whole live aspect, sometimes wrestlers go in the ring not knowing who's going to win the match. And it's all according to whoever is chosen by the director at the back. And again, for me, that was like, oh my gosh, imagine directing a show with no ending, but you only figure out the ending when it's live. Like, it's like an improvisational director, live directing. I'm always trying to figure out what the right word for it is. So that's what I'm really interested in. What is the role of the spectator? What is the role of the director? And not that I want to be a performer, but how do you make the director's role a bit more performative and a bit more than just the end of the rehearsal process?
Well, you just have to look at Vince McMahon, don't you?
Exactly.
And he is the ultimate director performer. He
Exactly.
is, it's quite hard to understand really that he's this character that you see on screen, sometimes calling the shots on screen, but actually he is the man that is controlling the business off the screen, behind the camera.
Exactly.
And it's this complete blur of, roles, like you said, and I'm not going to
Right.
go off too much off on the tangent,
It's
but I
so
love
crazy.
this view that you've just brought to the podcast of this idea of wrestling being the ultimate form of theatre. And incredible. I mean, I could talk for a long time about my favourite wrestlers and whatnot, but let's talk some more about you as a director and what you've been up to. So in 2019, you were the assistant director on Idris Elba and Kwame Kwei Amar's Tree, which was a co-production between the Young Vic and Manchester International Festival.
Yeah.
What was that like as an experience? Some huge figures involved in that production.
Oh, it was massive. Also, this was my first large-scale production. And a lot went on, from the actual show in itself to then the controversy with the whole writers and everything. So it was a big learning process, and the amount of different producers and producing houses that were involved. And I think communication, I learned how to kind of stronger my communication skills. So I feel like this was also not the perfect show for me. As I said, an issue with me is I'm not a fan of conventional theatre. So when it comes to assisting, I'm always looking for that other show, the show that is not just on stage in the space. I'm looking for something immersive or something different, something alternative.
Yeah.
And what this was for me was a kind of commercial packaging of my non-conventional direction.
That's spot on.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it was.
It was not experimental, but it was kind of different, but packaged in the right kind of way for, the politics of British theatre. So the audiences can, buy tickets and come in. Whereas my shows are kind of like, I don't really care about some of these rules, so I'm not going to do it. And then there's that kind of problem of, well, then producers are not going to take on your show, Tida, because it's not what it should be in that sense.
Because there's still that aspect of theatre, and especially, commercial theatre, that it needs to sell. But I was working for the Manchester International Festival at the time. I was working behind the scenes doing all the after parties that you may have come to on the square. fair. I don't know if you came to any of those. They
Yeah.
were good fun. So, for example, like you said, Tree was a huge production. It was probably the biggest of the festival in the way that it was
Mm.
commercially packaged, and having names like Idris Elba and Kwame involved in it obviously helps sell a show.
Yeah.
It's that commercial aspect.
Yeah.
That was an opportunity to work within a big production and really find out what is going on within these spaces.
Yeah, yeah. And there was dance, there was the music aspect. It was full. It was full of different design aspects. It was full in terms of structure, organization. It was full of different areas of learning, like, even in that whole experience of being at Myth and what it meant and who's who and what's what, that whole atmosphere. And then, coming back to Young Vic. So
Mm,
my learning of how to take a show that was massive and then bring it back down to the heart of what it needs to be, and also the rehearsal room, having all this, as let's say, big names. It wasn't, a kind of diva-esque. It was just a rehearsal
sure.
room. Yeah, it was just people playing in a room, people speaking, talking, discussing,
Mm.
and the subject as well, everything. It was just it was just heavy on every level. So I think that was great for my development and in understanding, and also given the opportunity to just be a part and create as well. I remember the last scene on Tree, because it was quite immersive as well, and I was, I'm really into immersive and how audiences can interact and blah blah blah. So I had suggested, like, oh, what if the audiences kind of bring out their torchlights? Because at the venue we had in Manchester, it was massive, and I was like, this reminds me of a concert.
It was like an old Victorian marketplace, wasn't it?
Right?
Which was
Yeah.
turned into this rave. It was insane.
Exactly. It was like a rave, and then the stage was like, I felt like I was at a big rock concert or something. And I said, this just reminds me of when audience bring out their flashlights. And we got to do something like that. We have to. I remember running up to the director, Kwame, and I was saying, and I just said, I have this idea. And then there was a lot of things happening, different things. And he was like, yeah, just run with it. So being able to, I guess, having that trust to have creative input on such a level, again, was empowering and also made me think, oh, cool, my voice kind of does matter. Not that my voice didn't matter, but yeah, it was cool on every aspect.
It must have been amazing. And how did that experience come about?
So I'm on the Directors Network at the Young Vic. So I've been doing quite a few things with the Young Vic, and the opportunity was just because they're quite open with their opportunities, and they posted that on their website. But yeah, I'd been doing different smaller projects at the Young Vic. So I think that's the short story. But yeah, so I applied through that.
No, that's cool because there are lots of director schemes, aren't there, and things like that at different
Hmm.
venues. And I'm always interested, was that just something that you thought, I'm going to go for this because it's going to further my practice? Or, what made you want to be a part of that?
The first thing I had to do after graduating was like find my home away from home because I spent a lot of time at my university, and that theater had everything, I guess, because it was kind of testing ground, so they had all the technology and equipment, and it was a good playground. But then after that, I needed to figure out like where I wanted to develop myself professionally, so what theater spoke to me. And I guess the Young Vic was the one that did. And then, they're incredible in terms of access and just their workshops on the Directors Network. Everything's free, tickets free. Can't remember the last time I paid for a ticket to watch a show at the Young Vic, which again is incredible. And it means that you're able to see things and you're able to either discussions after, there's mentorship schemes. So I really kind of grew with the Young Vic, and I appreciated the ideas and the stuff that we're putting on, and I wanted to assist there. This is where I want to learn from, and that's kind of how I got into there. But again, it's massively open. I think the thing that scared me after my BA was there were no jobs for directing. There was no like clear path on how to get in there. There was like, if you look at places like, not that these places are bad or anything, but places like the Royal Court or the Donmar, which only has like, the assistant director schemes where it's only like one person or two people per year, whereas the Young Vic was, again, open, incredible, constant, whatever you want to try, whoever you want to speak to, Sue Emma's there, it's incredible. So I think it's just like they were where I thought I fit in.
Because it's daunting, isn't it? I think when you've spent so much time studying something and putting all your
Mm,
energy into it, to then hope that it's going to be your craft moving
mm,
forward, And there's not always obvious doors in front of you, I
Yeah.
think, for creatives, and especially in directing. I think it's very difficult to navigate and find the right path for you. And I'm guessing that's why you are
Hmm.
still juggling lots of different projects.
Yeah,
I can see Tida on Zoom right now, and I can see all the different sticky notes in the background. And there's a whiteboard, I think. And is that how you keep tabs
yeah,
of what's going on
yeah.
creatively?
Because I'm a mess. That's the thing. I am so glad you noticed that. People are like, "Oh my God, you've got so much things on." I'm just looking. Half of the stuff I don't even read. I think I just put it there so it's like a
Yeah.
physical reminder. But
There's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. So we've just talked a little bit about some of the stuff that you did in 2019 with Tree and some of the stuff at the Young Vic. How has 2020 played out for you? What did you do back in the spring when we went into the first lockdown?
the beginning of 2020 was going very well. I feel like this is what everybody says. It's almost as if everyone was succeeding. I started off at the Royal Exchange in Manchester, so I was doing sound design there for Nikki Wilding, who's directing Cutting It,
Yeah,
and that was really cool. And so I finished that, and I remember this was literally 2nd of Jan. I was there for tech, so I was in Manchester for about 2 weeks, I think, and I came back here, and then I was on to sound designing for Angie Langfield at Central, so the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, and that was after Mrs. Rochester, which was, very kind of naturalistic, and I was like, ooh. At first, I was like, this is not really a Tito production in terms of like the sound design, but then the kind of layers and different scenes and the challenges that came with it, I think were brilliant. So I really enjoyed that. And then I had like my own kind of things happening. So Gilgamesh, which was a show I did like in 2018, was set to make its return. I was really excited for this because it's one of them, like I don't do favorites, but this was like my kind of favorite child. And it was returning. It had been in hibernation for a while, and we booked a few
yeah,
venues, and I was like, oh my God, wow, it's coming back. It's gonna
it's
be,
happening.
yeah, and it's like super again because my work is so non-conventional and nobody wants to book it. They're scared that we won't sell tickets and blah 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 blah, and audiences won't understand. So I'd found a few venues and ADs who kind of trusted that this is cool, this will work, let's try it. So that was exciting. And then also,
Yeah.
like, this is another issue with me. I'm constantly doing like 6 projects at a time. So just tell me when you're like, okay,
For creators, it's not always as simple as just being able to do one thing at once. You've
yeah.
got to be juggling all those different
And
plates.
I'm like a super workaholic as well, so it doesn't help. Or not maybe not a workaholic, but I'm in love with theatre so much that I'm only learning to say no now. But I just can't say no, and I'll do everything possible to work 2 texts at once if it's possible. So after that, so Gilgamesh, Antigone, which we're going to take to Sicily, and Pinocchio, which we're starting to go to Rome.
Mm.
So I had a few good projects, ready to go.
You just talked about all these amazing things that you had lined up, which must have been so exciting.
Yeah.
How did you feel then when you were told that this couldn't happen and you're going to have to stay at home?
Again, I'm like very overambitious and I think the biggest optimist in the world. So it was a good like 4 weeks of me going, nah, we're gonna be fine. And also as a director as well, you've got to carry all this morale and other people kind of feeling bad and I felt like it was up to me to kind of continue fighting and give that positive energy. So it was a lot of disbelief and then one day it sunk that I won't be going to Rome for the summer as I usually do, and I won't be going to Sicily for the second time either. So yeah, it was really sad. It was tragic, as everyone, kind of experienced. But it took some time before it actually hit, and I was like, okay, time to stay at home, time to close all these rehearsal readings or whatever we're doing or attempting to do. Whatever I'm trying to save, it can't be saved.
And how did you adapt then? Did you get to a point where you thought, I need to start making something?
At first, I was disappointed and really angry at, the government's kind of response and also the theatre industry in general. I remember they started like, oh, live streaming and the things that were live streaming. Like, there's several different politics in theatre. Yeah, I feel like I was angry, but what was I angry at? It was something. I mean, I think it was just the industry. I was angry at the industry, and then I said, you know what? Maybe theatre's not for me. I'm gonna stop here.
Really?
I'll see you soon. Yeah, and I just stopped. I just stopped everything. And also, I remember at the time there was a lot of Zoom meetings, and let's sit and talk. And I was like, I feel like I was just being a bit savage, but I was like, none of this is really gonna help me. Sitting and talking about my issues right now, if I can't solve it, I gotta let it go. So I don't want to sit and like talk about how I can't get a job when I know that right now nobody can get a job,
Yeah.
that we're all in this kind of situation where we can't change anything. And for me, talking wasn't going to help. So I kind of shut down theatre for a while, didn't want to see anything. I think I even like muted theatre tweets on my Twitter. I was like, nope, shut down any kind of like I had some workshops and stuff that I had to continue from the Young Vic, but I just couldn't find the strength or the motivation or inspiration, like because we had to transfer it to Zoom and I was like, I can't. There was no creativity, there was no like positive feelings towards it. And I said, if I force myself, then it's gonna end up being something really bad and I don't think it's not serving the purpose. So that's what I did to begin with. And then I started because I live with my niece. And so we started having this kind of family sessions where for like 2 hours a day we do like a skill share. Silly. And she studies UX UI, so coding and user experience and interface.
Okay.
And she had her lectures in the living room. And I remember sitting there and I was like, okay, interesting. I'm kind of learning from the way in which they view audiences and how they cater to audiences and what that process means and that structure looks like. And she would have her 2 hours of the day kind of teaching what she knows and coding. And I built like a small like a prototype of an app and I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm going to continue kind of working on my digital skills. So I got back to Final Cut and I said, I'm going to polish. Let's see what else I can do. Let's see what else I can learn. Let's try text animation. Let's just try and see how films work, how movies work, live streams. People, how are they engaging with us? How are YouTubers doing? What's Netflix doing? Because Netflix made a lot of money this year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the one thing everyone's been talking
Exactly.
about.
So what are these processes? How are they winning? And how can I kind of I didn't do it because I was thinking, for the kind of capitalistic gain. I did it because I just didn't want to do theatre anymore. And I was really excited about doing anything else that is kind of creative, I guess. So that was my initial response to that. And then jobs started kind of slowly coming in. Because also this is another thing I was saying, that what saves me from having to do jobs like, as an artist, at the beginning, I was working in
Yeah,
hospitality,
yeah.
but what allowed me to no longer do that is because I had these other skill sets. Being a sound designer means there's different jobs coming in and something, sound is something I love to do. Designing sound is great. So I was all of a sudden, instead of like working in retail to help me, sound was kind of funding my directing,
Sure.
which meant I stayed in theatre.
And obviously met new people on the way and made really important connections.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the next thing that started happening, I guess, after things calmed down a bit and things started to open up. There was a lot of like sound commissions, and everyone was like so excited. Oh my gosh, time we're going digital. How can we live stream theaters, Zoom theater? Oh, we're gonna need sound designers. So I think there was a booming work for any like technically skilled designers. And that's what I kind of started doing, like small projects and film projects. And then I slowly started thinking, okay, maybe theatre isn't that bad after all.
Maybe there are things I can still get involved in.
COVID, I think, allowed for this space of reflection and freedom. There's obviously financial restrictions and issues and that stress. But what it meant was there were no more deadlines. There were no more like working jobs that I wasn't super enthusiastic about, or working with people who said they were one way and then I entered the rehearsal room and then another way. There was none of that energy anymore. So it kind of gave me this freedom to do whatever I wanted to try. I mean, again, I'm privileged and fortunate enough to have like the equipment in my room and things to play with. But I feel like that was the one of the most important things I learned. And it allowed me to stop and pause and realize that all this time, working these kind of 6 jobs to survive, what was also feeding into this idea of these jobs fed into the validation of who I was as an artist. And that was getting very dangerous. I was like, oh, if I work this, and this job, then I'm a good artist, which I don't think is right. And I don't think it's what art is supposed to be. That there shouldn't really be a structure or a path in that way. So it kind of allowed me to step out and realize that I was almost kind of getting trapped in a sense. But at the same time, it was hard to access any creativity because my inspirations come from the experiences. It comes from public spaces. I like to work with audiences. I like to work physically. I like, encounters that I have around the world and the visuals. Like I'm constantly traveling. Lockdown also taught me about my bedroom. Never really been in here. I was like, wow, great. Before that, I would just like sleep 6 hours and I'm out and then I'm back again in the evening straight to bed.
Sure.
So because I'm constantly traveling and I'm constantly seeing things and I'm collecting and consuming visuals and seeing the way things are translating advertisements. Like, I really want to be like a Don Draper when I was younger, which, not the negative sides of
Yeah,
him, but, just the advertising. So I think that also stopped me from accessing. It was hard to access my creativity. Not that I had gone, but it was just like, how do I get into that when there's no stimulus kind of helping me and feeding into that? That was the issues, but also the freedom to find it.
Yeah, I think a lot of my guests have kind of said what you've said in the sense that there's not these deadlines to be so worried about and having to put work out by a certain
Hmm.
date and things like that. And what you've
Exactly.
just said about finding inspiration, I mean, you've just incredibly summed up how much of a difficult time it has been for people working in theatre and the arts. And that leads
Hmm.
us on to our piece of artist advice for
Hmm.
the episode for the week, which comes from the incredible Kathy Burke. I'm still so surprised that she shared this with us to share with our guests and our listeners. I don't really need to say too much about Kathy Burke other than that she's an actor, a writer, director, national treasure, and that most of you will know who she is from me saying her name. But these are just some of the words that she gave us to share for the episode. She said, "These are indeed precarious times, particularly for artists and creatives, and my heart goes out to those starting in the industry. My advice would be join a union. It really pays dividends to be a member of Equity or whichever union represents your field. Making sure you understand your rights on payment is more important now than ever. Professional work should be paid no matter how small the fee. Do favours when you've got food on your own table first. Look out for freebies. There's lots of stuff online now that you can access, whether it's from BFI, they've got great films, the National Theatre chucks out a free play every now and then, and most of the big art galleries have online viewings. Sign up for offers everywhere you can." And that was just a summary of what Kathy Burke said, which I think some of it was really fascinating, especially this idea of be a part of something which will help you understand your rights as a creative. Because there's this weird thing within, especially theatre, I think, in lots of ways, and the
Hmm.
arts, that you're expected as a young person, well, not even just a young person, but as a
Hmm.
creative, to go to drama school or university or music college and perfect your craft and then almost spend the years after that giving it away for
For
free.
free.
Yeah, and are you concerned, Tida, that due to the financial impact that COVID's had upon the industry, that there'll be more expectations of people to work for free when things get back up and running?
Yeah, I feel like again, it's a really hard time. And also the annoying thing about the industry is that the only way, not the only way, but the biggest, the most of my jobs come from the networks and connections I've made. I mean, I do like a load of applications a week. I have like deadlines in my calendar to like apply for things. But then I get a load of rejections. But most of the work is like, oh, I heard your name through this person and this person, and most of it happens that way. So when I go to work at universities and they're like, oh, how do you get jobs? It's like, because I was recommended. And then it's like, how do you become recommended? Because I used to work
Sure.
unfairly and work for free. So it does exist, and it does exist in other, not just the theatre as well, which is annoying. But 100%, I think that's a big thing I learned during my reflection. Again, that I'm chasing something that is very dangerous, and I need to know my worth and how much my art is worth and how much my practices and the processes. And people don't understand the work you have to do. So what I tend to do nowadays is like write a list of, this is what I need to do. If this is the role that you want me to do, this is now step by step what the process looks like and how much, according to your fee, how much that is. I recently, like, I think last week, there was like a really small fee for something. And I was like, oh my gosh, but this director is so cool. And I really love this. But really and truly, if I take this job, I'm going to have to make sure I'm working another 3 jobs to survive, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
How is that possible? And then there was also like conversation of like, maybe you don't have to be in, every day. You can be in once a week, and then that covers your fee and whatnot. But what's the point? Again, this is me as an artist. How do you connect to a project? Maybe it's because I'm also a director, I'm not just a designer. How do you connect to a process if you're only in there once a week? I can't do it.
So for people that aren't necessarily working within theatre at the moment, am I right in thinking that lots of jobs are very much a one-off fee,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then you're expected to kind of have an input throughout the period that the project's running?
Yeah, and sometimes, sometimes it's fair. Sometimes people don't understand what exactly your role means and what it takes to do the job. So sometimes, it's just like having to explain to them. And sometimes I don't want to say they don't know, because it's like, how do you not know that this is like a bad fee? So yeah, right now it's kind of like one-off fees, and I think the trend I'm seeing is that they're reducing it to days now,
Okay.
which I guess is fine. But also on the other side, it's theatre, and for me, how do I stay away from a rehearsal process? Or the other thing is like, you're paying me for 1 day's work to be in the rehearsal room. What about the making process that I have to do the other days? So 100% knowing, finding your unions and having these discussions and speaking freely about money. I think just talking with your peers and other people in the game and just saying, this is what I get paid. How much do you get paid? What is this? What is that? Blah, 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 blah. Having these conversations, I think, is really
Well,
important.
that's how it becomes fair, isn't it? If nobody knows what
Yeah,
everyone's getting paid and nobody knows what the other person's doing or receiving for a
yeah,
project, then it's always going to be skewed, isn't it? I think.
exactly.
So I'm also really interested because we've talked about some of these projects and the work that will hopefully lie ahead.
Mhm.
But I want to find out a little bit more about your journey so far, Tida, because all the things that you've achieved sound fantastic. And I want to know what your relationship with theatre was like as a child, if there was one at all.
This is a funny story. Um, I didn't take drama at GCSE, did I? No, I did dance. And the first time I kind of did anything dramatic, like theatre, not like dramatic, was when I auditioned for NYT. But I only auditioned for it because my friend was auditioning for it and she didn't want to be alone.
And you were like, sure, I'll come along.
Yeah, and I was like, sure. And then I got in and I was like, this is cool. Maybe I can do it. And then my sister was like, because both my parents have passed away, so I've lived with my sister most of my life. She was like, nope, can't afford that. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Anyway, I didn't want to be an actor anyway. I wanted to be a doctor. So I was like, that's
You wanted
fine.
to be a doctor?
Yeah, really weird, right? So completely different.
I suppose doctors have an element of control that directors do. There's some link.
Maybe it was this idea of, losing both parents. So I wanted to not save people, but kind of help in that kind of world. Yeah. Then I went to A levels. So I think as a child, the one constant I realized is wrestling. I think that is the one constant. And in my house, when we were really young, again, just like, how we had the 2 hour sharing session, we used to do like challenges. So today's challenge is who can make the best rock song or the best rap song or the best Metallica inspired guitar solo, but without a guitar, because blah, blah, blah. So we used to do like weird things like that when we were young.
And was that competitive?
Yeah, let's just say our house isn't the best, but character development. Character development. So I think that was the one constant, wrestling. Then I went to my A levels and again studying I wanted to be a cardiologist. And instead of further maths, I was accidentally on the system put in drama and theatre studies. And I went to the class and my tutor had told me, oh, you just go to the first class and then tell whoever the drama teacher is that you are not supposed to be there and blah 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 blah. But I went in the class and I was like, oh, okay. I was a bit, quiet. I'm not gonna like make a scene. I'm not meant to be here. So let's just do this class. It's only one drama class. How bad can it be? Did the drama class, and at the end of the day, I was like, oh, Miss Nash,
Okay.
phenomenal performer, phenomenal tutor, and yeah, just a really cool person. I was like, oh, walking up to her to tell her I wasn't meant to be there. And she was like, oh, yes, Munotida, how can I help you? And I was like, that was just a really cool session. And I just walked out. And I continued to come to this drama lesson. And my tutor was like, what about further maths? And I was like, oh, I'll do it after school. And then tragedy arose where I started bunking my other classes for drama because I just got addicted. That's when I knew there was a problem here and decisions need to be made because my test results will not get me into would not get me into a good university or wherever I wanted to go at the time. Because again, highly disciplined, and high achiever. I think it also comes with the idea of not the idea, kind of the notion of Black people having to work 3 times, 4 times as hard to kind of be seen, be noticed. And so I spent a lot of time, I had 16 GCSEs, A stars.
Wow.
That was my mindset. And, again, not having parents, I'm like, I must prove I'm good.
Mm.
When I realized I was slacking in my other A level classes, I just didn't care anymore. That's when I said, there's a problem here. There's something happening. And then Punch Drunk changed my life. That was it.
Your tutor must have been incredible to have gripped you from that
Yeah.
first session. Bearing in mind that was one of your first experiences of
Yeah.
doing theatre class or, studying theatre.
Yeah, physically as
Yeah,
well.
and then I'm assuming that within just over a year's time after that first clash, you then started to consider going on to university to do that.
Yeah, that was the
That's
thing.
quite a short period of time, I think.
Right, to, like, give up everything. I remember I had this, like, because I was, like, really good at history, and they wanted me to go to Cambridge and blah, 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 and my history tutor, who was also the deputy head, kind of called me into his office, and I just remember this moment. He was like, "But you can be a director and still go to Cambridge and study history." And I was like, "But why would I go to university and do something, like, I don't wanna do and then do what I wanna do after?"
Because it
Like,
reflects well on them.
exactly. It was really shocking. I was like, you're speaking to me. We both know what's going on here. But am I really going to do something that I'm not in love with? I'd rather do what I want to now and have no regrets because I did what I loved at that time, at that moment, and that's it.
So when you were making the decision to go to university, or whilst you were at university, should I say,
Mhm.
did a career within the arts always just seem viable?
Because I'm this massive optimist, there was no doubt. Listen, I don't really say this anymore because I don't like saying it because I didn't understand why I was doing it either. But I wanted to be an actor, so
Okay.
I did apply to some drama schools, which is like so silly thinking about it right now. An actor for real? So I remember like, yeah, I'm gonna get into drama school, then I'm gonna have an agent, and then I'm gonna sell out wherever, the national, all this stuff. So I thought I really could do it. And then when I was rejected from every single one of them, it's so funny because now I teach at these drama schools and I remember like, when you walk in and you're like, I see the memory of myself being rejected and walking out. It never like I still don't feel like a part of that world, even though I actually teach there. So yeah, there was no heavy sense of doubt. I think I had a good support unit at home. My sister's always encouraging. She was a bit sad about the whole Cambridge thing, but she was like, "Yeah, cool, do what your heart wants." And I guess again, it's that thing of if you love something, you just love it, and it doesn't matter whatever comes after. If it's bad, I'll learn my lesson, and then I'll find something else to love. But at that moment, I was obsessed. I was addicted. I just loved it, no doubt. Couldn't tell me no for anything. Or if there was the no's or the rejections, it was like, okay, what is plan B?
Yeah.
What's the next thing I want to do? Where do I want to go? And then when I went to Middlesex and found out all about contemporary design, and I was like, you could be a designer, and I could design posters, and I could do photography, and I could do video design. Like, there's a whole world in here. It's not just directing and acting. And so I guess that was my thing, that I could do other things. It's not just the one thing. I could do so many other things as well.
So many transferable skills in
Yeah.
there from that course that you said you studied. You are now, like you said, kind of teaching and tutoring at the drama schools and at the University of Arts London. How did that come about? Was that something you applied for, or did that just happen after your master's?
So during my master's as well, I went back to my college because they had one of the drama teachers just left and they had an open space and they're like, "Do you want to teach dramas one day a week?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's see if I can inspire someone the way I was inspired." So I did that for a bit and I said, "Okay, teaching's not too bad, especially like with people who want to be in the room. Obviously, some people don't want to be in the room and it's a bit hard, a bit of a pain sometimes." But I said, "Okay, this is cool. This is fine." And then I think the rest of this, like at UAL, that was because one of my lecturers, my tutors at university, then transferred to the head of the course there. And she was kind of, she's trying to shake it up, trying to open more opportunities for women and Black people. And she was like, "Yeah, come through, come in." And obviously, she understood, like, that's the other thing I was thinking, like, people rarely understand my practice. They say they do, but there's some people who really like truly do, and she's one of them, Caitlin, absolutely brilliant. So she invited me to come through and like first of all assist on a few workshops and run a few sessions. So that was that. And then at Middlesex where I studied, they were good as well. And again, because they watched my development and I got a scholarship from there as well. So they again really understood where I was coming from and why I find it hard to say some things and define myself and how what my practice was becoming. They wanted me to continue to kind of share that. So I continued to do that over there as a kind of visiting lecturer, design tutor kind of thing. It's all, again, which is annoying, it's because I know people, no application, unfortunately.
But that's a testament to you, and I think in the work that you've put in along the way,
Mhm,
surely.
mhm, mhm. I agree. I
I don't
don't
expect you to elaborate on that too much because I
I was like,
don't.
yeah, I'm great.
So have you still been working with students throughout this COVID
Yeah,
period this year?
yeah.
What advice have you been giving them, or what advice would you give to anybody studying at university, hoping to pursue a creative career?
Just to continue constantly looking for opportunities and don't think that it gets any, not that it
Yeah.
doesn't get easier, but you kind of get used to it. The grind just becomes a bit regular. So just constantly looking for opportunities and constantly trying to find ways to develop your practice. I guess the big thing as well that I say is it's a discipline. When I'm speaking to actors, that students, that just as musicians kind of constantly practice playing violin, blah, 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 your body is your instrument. And so it needs to be trained, it needs to be developed, it needs to remain focused. It's similar to what I tell my design students, that you can't just come up with designs. I mean, you can, but it's good to find inspirations to consume as much art as you can. So look for these opportunities, and that doesn't have to be like, the grandest of the art. You don't have to be at the Tate all the time, but art is in everything and everywhere. And find your people, find your group, establish networks, and just be nice, I guess. I feel like there's a lot of bad people in this industry, and there's no reason to be. Like, another big thing that annoys me is like directors in tech. There's these, not ideas, what's the word? I can't remember the word, but I'm going to use notions. I don't know if that's the right one. That tech is stress and like directors are rude and like these type of things that are kind of upheld, especially like when I'm working at drama schools. Some of these directors, the way they treat students, I see, and I'm like, it's unnecessary. There's no need. And there's no need to give these people the power. I guess as
Mm,
the younger generation, I'm constantly like, you got to challenge these people. Hierarchy needs to be fluid. You're a student, you're there to learn. So make sure you're learning and not being used. So know yourself as an artist. And if you don't know yourself as an artist, find yourself. And it's all right not to know, but what is
yeah.
not all right to do is not to figure out how you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you get what I mean.
What you've just talked about is that finding yourself as an artist. And
Yeah.
as we come to the end of the
Yeah.
podcast, I'm going to give you the
Yeah.
opportunity to give a little nod or a shout out to some of the people and the
Oh
places that have
no.
helped you on their journey so far. Don't say oh no, because this is a big part of the podcast every week.
Okay. Can I cheat it?
Yeah.
Because, this is so hard. This question, I'm not a fan of this question because, again, I have so many different types of people who offer so many different types of support in so many different types of ways for the different work I do.
Sure.
Like, even today, I had some really good news. And I know there's a specific friend that I'm going to tell this news to, even though we haven't known each other for that long. But I know that the belief and understanding of who I am as an artist, this person would be really happy for me and really understand why this thing is, amazing. Whereas another friend wouldn't really understand that. So I feel like I hate when inspirations are favorites, but I'm going to cheat it and I'm going to do three things. Like,
Go for it.
so the first one, it's just the WWE in general. They're a bit problematic in terms of the politics, who they are, what they do, what they support, blah, blah, blah. But that is a source of theatre for me as a design, understanding audiences, also the way in which it kind of works with TV and live experience has been really important for me. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing I'm going to say is the Red Hot Chili Peppers song Can't Stop. And that's just, I think, a nod to music in general and how much it fills my life. And that song and the Chili Peppers in general, sometimes they're just singing words and you don't understand and it's a mess, but then you get into it and you find your place within it and you understand. And that's like life, I feel like that's my life. I'm a mess. I don't know what I'm doing sometimes.
That's exactly how I'd sum up the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Find myself singing along, but not really making any words. So
Yeah,
just
you're
going,
like,
dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
or even when you know the words, you're like, what are you saying, Anthony? This makes no sense. But I love it. There's a love for it. There's love somewhere in it. And there's mess and creative power and blah, blah, blah. So that's just a nod to music in general. Music is everything to me. And then the final one is between, I was going to say, it's between the loss of my parents, like the strength that it's given me, or no, I'm going to go with insufficient funds in my bank account. So that constant reminder when you want to buy something, or when you buy something and your card declines, or when a bill has just come out and you buy something else and you just get that text from Barclays saying you have insufficient funds in your bank account. That is inspiring to me because it's like, okay, how can I break this? What is the way I can work around this? So thank you, Barclays, for constantly telling me I have insufficient funds in my bank
You
account.
said that you weren't a fan of the question, but your responses to the question have now made it my favourite question ever. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for agreeing to take the time to be on the podcast. You've honestly captivated me seriously now for like the duration of the conversation that we've just had. I can't wait for people to listen to
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. It was great to meet Tida and find out what it is that influences the theatre that she makes. You can check out one of her latest projects, In the Absence of Justice, on Burnt Lemon Theatre's Instagram page. Don't forget to follow us on social media at startsandgrafts on Twitter and Instagram. I've been your host Connor, Ella's been your producer, and we hope to see you all again next week. But until then, take care.